Hi. In this video, we're going to be looking at the color tools of Illustrator and seeing how to finalize a palette that you might choose for your design. And again, I've opened up the assignment for Square Illustrator template so that you're reminded that this is the simple 7-inch square, I believe, that you're going to create your final rendering in. And oh, I don't know, let's just make a few shapes on here. Obviously, you're going to have a very beautiful design that you have prepared from your tight roughs that you're going to be translating and improving as you render it in the square using the shape tools and the vector tools and everything that you know how to use already. Obviously, you're going to be using some type tools as well. One of the things that you're going to have to do is impart color to all your shapes now. So let's look at how you're going to do that. I'm going to start off by going from Essentials into Essentials Classic, which, as you all know, is my favorite workspace here. And you are free to use your own, of course. And we're going to open up the color guide. We're going to go into the window there and open up this window here, which has a bunch of suggested palettes on there for us. We're not going to mess with those though, because we want to create either a triadic or an analogous color scheme for our design here. So what we're going to do is go into the color wheel and choose some colors that we can use for a palette for our piece. And if you when you open up the color guide by clicking this little round thing that kind of looks like a color wheel here, you might not see it at first. You get in an edit mode and an assign mode, and we want to go into the edit mode to see the color wheel. This is the quickest way I know to get an analogous or a triadic color scheme. Just go into their harmony rules, and let's look for a triadic color scheme first. And I'm just going down through them real quick, and I see a whole bunch of, well, I see 3 triads. We're going to pick, oh, just at random, let's pick triad 2. And when triad 2 opens up on the color wheel, you're going to at first see the swatches that some Adobe color theorist decided might be an interesting palette for you to start with. It's a triad. It probably isn't real obvious though, because these colors are all so desaturated and so pale that they don't really strike us with their real hues at this point. But you're going to see as we begin to mess with them a little bit here that they will make a perfect triad. I'm going to click on this one color tool here and draw it out towards the edge. And as I do, you'll notice that up there on my bar of swatches, one of those swatches has gone from being kind of a pale, insipid pink to a red-hot fuchsia sort of a pink. I'm going to grab this one and I'm going to pull it out too. And then I'm going to grab this one and pull it out too. Now, one of my colors just stayed a very dark brown when I did that. The other one got a much more intense green. This one, let's select this one here. This one is a brownish color, right? But I'm going to go down here to the sliders that are now affecting this color. And I'm going to say, let's see what color it is by turning its brightness up a little bit. And it turns out it's kind of a golden orangey yellow. But I can adjust its brightness with this slider. Brightness is their stand-in for the term we know as value. I can adjust its saturation, make it much grayer. You'll notice that the color tool is moving in towards the center because on this color wheel, hue and saturation are featured. Hue around the outside edge and saturation towards the center. If we want to adjust the brightness or the value of it, we have to use another slider. Now this would adjust the brightness and the value of all of our swatches. You can watch that happen as I adjust them up and down. If you want to adjust, if you like having them all very bright, but you want just one of them to be quite dark, say green, you would select that one and move its value down, and you'll notice that that green is getting very dark, right? What if I want more than these colors that they've given me? Here's one in the center here that I can mess with. They've given me 4 color tools here. I can add a color if I like by clicking on this and then clicking anywhere along these legs of the tripod, right? So I could click and add another color on this sort of yellow-orange side, right? So as I add colors, they are appearing here. If I wish to adjust any of them, all I have to do is select one. I can move it out along the tripod legs, and I can change its saturation here or its brightness. Now, if I change its hue, watch what happens. If I change its hue, all by itself, that would knock it out of the triad. So Illustrator won't let me do that. If I try to change the hue of one color, it changes my whole triad. This is a really reliable way to get a very precise triadic color scheme, because if you choose one of those triads, you can choose any of them because they'll just give you this sort of tripod effect, and then you can change all the colors on it. You will end up with tints and shades of your color. Obviously, a tint is a version with more white in it, a shade is a version with more black in it. I'm happy to have you use tints and shades of any color in your triad. The only thing that is illegal is to use a color that is not on the tripod legs. So that's a triadic color scheme. When you're happy with your scheme, and wow, this is a wild one, but I think I'll make this one a little bit brighter so I can see its color just a little more. There we go. When you're happy with your triadic scheme and you think you've got all the colors in it that you need, then all you need to do in order for it to show up in your swatches so that you can use it for any stroke or fill, any path, font, any type that you're putting in, all you have to do is go over to the New Color Group button. Click on this, and this group here will show up in your color groups. You can name this color group. You can name it Kathy's Triad, right? If you're happy with it, that's great. Just click OK. And yes, save the changes. And now, if I decide I want to fill this shape with a color from my triadic color scheme, all I have to do is go into my swatches, and there is Kathy's Triad. I can even hover over the folder if I am unsure which of those folders it is, and it will tell me that that's Kathy's Triad. And I can pick for its fill, for the fill of that shape, that green that I put into my triadic color scheme. And over here, the color guide is keeping up with me and saying, oh, if you want a tint or a shade of that, you could grab that too, and you could add them to your swatches up here. It's very, very easy to add, obviously, and the color guide is going to continue to give you ideas for doing that. Just make sure, if you're using a triadic color scheme, that any gradients you use are along the legs of your tripod, right? So if you have, for example, a color like this, right, and a color like, let's pick something else. Let's give another, so these two colors are both reds or red oranges sort of, and they were both along the same leg of my color wheel. So if I were to make a gradient from one of these colors to another, I would still be within my triadic scheme. If I were to make a gradient, however, between this color and this color, then I would no longer be in my triadic scheme. That would be a color that was in between and not on the scheme. So that's one thing that you do need to watch out for. Let's try making a gradient that's legal and a gradient that's illegal so that you can see what I mean. Let's make a gradient in the background square. This is obviously going to take the rectangle tool, but this rectangle you get for free. You may impart color to that background square, and it looks like I'd better go Object, Arrange, Send to Back, or I won't be able to see my other little critters there. So we're going to put a gradient in here. Let's open the gradient tool by double clicking it. I'm going to ask for a, let's see, Let's make it a radial gradient. And I'm going to ask for a color on my gradient slider from my swatches. And sure enough, when I open up the swatches here, I see my gradients. So I'm going to say I'd like the outside of this gradient, instead of it being black, I'd like it to be red. And I'd like the other color to be this peachy color that I know is on the same tripod leg of my triad, right? So this gradient from, I'm going to move this down here so you see a little bit more of the peachy color. This little slider here lets me decide how far apart between the colors the blend is, right? I wanted to see a little bit more of that peachy color. So I've got a gradient that would be legal. Any of these colors, because they're all along that tripod leg, would be in that triad, right? However, if I were to take this gradient slider and say, I'd like to put blue in there, then I begin to get a purple color, which is not in my triad, right? So be careful using gradients. Although that's gorgeous and I kind of like it, it would be illegal for your triadic color scheme. Now, in an analogous color scheme, you won't have those problems, right? So I'm gonna, let's select everything here. Go back to my black selection tool, select everything so that I can tell it that I want a white fill here for everything. So we'll go back to where we started. Now we're going to open up the color guide again. We'll leave the gradient tool out in case we need it. And we're in the Assign section, but instead we're going to go back to Edit so we can see the color wheel. We're going to go up to the color harmony rules, and this time we're going to ask it for an analogous scheme. And there are two right here on top, and either one will work. They're all going to give you a set of very, very closely related sliding color tools. So I'm going to grab one and pull it out because these colors are all so pale that it doesn't give me enough contrast to work with very well. So I'm going to pull these out and begin to see what those colors look like and how far apart they are. You'll notice that they're all clustered on this side, but I have a little bit more freedom to move them around and move them apart from each other than I did before. With the triadic scheme, if you don't stay on the legs of that tripod, you're really not in a triadic scheme anymore. But in an analogous scheme, you have a little bit more leeway. So I'm going to ask you, in your analogous scheme, be careful not to go beyond about a quarter of the color wheel. And this is why. Let's look at this scheme here. This scheme goes from orange pretty much all the way to purple. It's kind of a reddish purple, right? Here's maybe the real purples, and then you get into the kind of blue purples. But it's already going from quite warm to almost cool there, right? Let's try an analogous color scheme in another sector of the color wheel. And to do that, we're going to have to unlink the relationships between these colors. I'm going to click on this thing that says unlink harmony colors because an analogous scheme won't let me just rotate it around the color wheel like I could the triadic scheme. So I'm going to come over here and move these one at a time into the orange yellow area here. Now, as long as I'm going from one quarter of the color wheel into the center and out to the edge, as long as I'm sticking to those areas here, and obviously I can change their value and so forth, either one at a time or all together, as I showed you before. So long as I don't get further apart than that, I'm going to consider that an analogous scheme. But look at this scheme here. This scheme definitely goes from warm to cool. And in a sense, you're losing a little bit of the punch of an analogous color scheme. An analogous scheme really should give you this nice unified feeling of the colors all being in a family. So if you could get them just a little bit closer together than a quarter of the color wheel, maybe more like a fifth of the color wheel, then you begin to have them just snuggle up to each other a little bit closer so that they're all clearly related to this sort of, yellow neighborhood that you're after, right? You begin to get this sort of nice warm glowing feeling from your palette. All right, so wherever you choose to center your palette, you want to think of certainly not being more than about a quarter of the color wheel. You think of it as like a pie wedge. So you get anything that you want in here, right? But just nothing from the other 3/4 of the color wheel. And of course, within the hue and saturation range there, you could also get whatever values you wanted. So you could get any of these dark colors, and you don't have to darken the whole wheel like that. You could pick one color and darken it, right? And you can mess with the saturation, although if you mess with the hue very much, right, you could easily be out of your quarter of the color wheel. And you can see me operating the slider here and making that thing swing. So this is big time fun. Let's take this kind of random color palette that I've come up with here. Let's save that as a new color group, and I'm not going to call it Kathy's Triad this time. I don't know why it gave it that name. I'm going to call this one Kathy's Analogous. And we're going to click OK. I don't think I ever saved it, but it's going to ask me if I want to save it, and I'm going to say yes, I want to save it. Okay, so now if I go to make a gradient, say maybe in the background of this critter here, I'm going to select it with my black selection tool. Oops, I'm going to deselect everything and make sure I just have my square selected. And now I'm going to open that. Oh, I've got the gradient tool open, and I'm going to fill this square here with, let's say, a linear gradient this time. And I'm going to say, obviously I don't want these colors because now I'm looking for my analogous color scheme. So I'm going to double click this slider and say, where's my analogous scheme? There it is. Let's take that dark blue and put it down there. And then let's take this one here and make it a pale greenish blue. And now you see, because these two colors are both in that pie wedge, anything in between them is necessarily also going to be in the pie wedge. So you can use any of your colors in an analogous scheme as a gradient. All right, so for the triadic, please stick with your gradients to colors that are on one leg of the tripod. For analogous, you can use anything. And you can also use black and white, because what would happen? You would get tints and shades. So for example, if I decided I wanted to move this blue, let's see if I can move it a little bit down here, and add another gradient slider, and all I have to do is hover over it until I see the plus sign. I'm going to put it down there, and I could make that one black if I wanted to, right? And then all these gradients in here would still be between blue and black, and therefore in my analogous color scheme. Hope that makes sense. I hope this little review gave you a clear idea, if you didn't have it already from the color theory lesson the other day, of the difference between an analogous and a triadic scheme. Remember, as you decide which one you're going to use, that an analogous scheme tends to give unity, a triadic scheme tends to give variety. And so think about which one your design needs more. Please don't neglect the negative shape. Remember, this is not this square that you would make to give that background a fill does not count as one of your 5 rectangles. White, of course, is a legitimate choice for your negative shape, just as black is a legitimate choice for your fonts. However, those are often the default choices, and if you choose a white background or black fonts, the bar is going to be very high for you to make those interesting, to convince me that they are deliberate choices and not just a failure to think about them. So do be careful. Black and white are powerful. Use them well if you use them. So that's it. I think you have what you need now to create either the analogous or the triadic scheme. Have a lot of fun with these color tools. They really are a blast. And remember that you can apply both strokes and fills to any of your shapes, and your fonts can also have strokes and fills. So have fun with that. Don't forget when you're writing your essay to name your chosen color scheme, whether it's triadic or analogous, please. Thank you. Have fun.